Welcome, audience members. You are now entering the Parliament of the Daleks, a Doctor Who podcast focusing on the toys, action figures, and merchandise from the past, present, and future of our favorite sci-fi franchise. I'm your Dalek fanatic host, Wade, joined by figure expert Alex, and this is our fourth episode, The Customizers of Death. In this episode, we'll be exploring a unique group of people in the fandom. Though there are over hundreds of Doctor Who characters as official action figures, the unfortunate reality is we can't have a figure of every single monster, villain, alien, companion, or background character from the show. Or can you? Well, some people have taken it upon themselves to make their own figures for their collection. These people are action figure customizers. These fans and hardcore collectors create their own works of art by taking existing figures and modifying them. Some are sculptors and create their own handmade sculpts, and the limit is your imagination. Others rely on technology and even 3D print parts, or even build their own action figures from scratch. Some are excellent kit bashers, meaning they take pieces and parts of other existing figures and rebuilt it as one into something new. Lastly, if you want to truly make a custom shine, the best thing you could ever do is give it a good paint job. Some fans are expert painters who have an insane attention to the smallest of details and a perfect use of color. Joining us in our first customizers discussion is the extremely talented and good friend, Scott.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott, aka Gallifrey Customs, and I'm very happy to be joining you all.
We're so happy to have you with us, and be sure to follow him on Instagram. He is one of the best.
Oh, thank you.
Also, you may not have known this, but he is also an excellent customizer himself. In this discussion, we have Jack.
Thanks, Wade. It's good to be back.
And then also joining us is our figure expert who probably knows everything about these toys and their insides and outs, who is also another amazing customizer. Alex is joining us.
Hello, and if you want to see any of my custom figures, you can check me on Instagram at Doctor Who Figure Photos.
All right, to start off our discussion, I wanted to do some good old-fashioned Q&A with the group. Our first question is, how did you get into the world of customizing figures? And what was the first custom you created? Scott, we'll start with you.
So, I got into customizing about 15 years ago when the show first started. I saw people on YouTube doing them, particularly Torchwood 95 was quite a big inspiration at the time, and another gentleman called Baby Jelly, and I just saw them doing it and I thought, you know what, I'd love to make characters that haven't had official figures. And the first custom I created was a Jenny, which was using a primeval Abby. Wasn't the best, and I had to lose a lot of articulation with the sculpting I did, but I feel like I've come quite a long way since then.
That Jenny figure is absolutely incredible, and what a great way to start from it as well. That's way better than what I can do nowadays, that's for sure, and you were able to do that at 7 years old. That's amazing. Jack, same question for you.
I think, like many, my first exposure to the customizing community was Vote Saxon 07's Modification Madness series, specifically his Day of the Doctor figure of the 11th Doctor. I remember watching that video like a million times, thinking, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. So eventually I sort of bit the bullet and made my own, but it was like the most shoddily put together one. The paint was flaking off, the tweed material was still on the arms, the waistcoat wasn't glued down still, but properly, but it still sort of sparked my passion for customizing.
That's really cool. And do you still have that figure to this day, Jack, or no?
That's long gone.
That's a bummer. Alex, what about you?
Well, I got into it quite late, really. I sort of got into doing customs at the age of around 13, I think. I was just sort of at a Comic Con one day, and my dad sort of like pointed out some primeval figures and was like, we could get these and do some customs with them. And I was like, yeah, that's quite a cool idea. And so we basically then just set out to just start doing two customs, which was the 10th Doctor in Tuxedo and the 8th Doctor from Dark Eyes. And I've still got the 10th Doctor in Tuxedo I did. Obviously, it's kind of redundant now because of the official version being released a couple of years after I made it. But actually, for a first custom, I actually think it's pretty good. I'd say the only flaw with it was that I sort of swapped the 10th Doctor's lower legs with the Master's body, and basically the creases don't match up on the legs at all. And like the proportions just sort of go a bit funky on the knees. Apart from that, I'd actually say it's actually quite a good one I did there. And in terms of like people online who inspired me, I think it's mostly just researching like on Google Images, like just random customs and things. And obviously, for Saxon 07's Modification Madness also had quite a bit of influence on me as well, like with his War Doctor TARDIS, and as Jack said, the Series 7B 11th Doctor, and the Day of the Doctor Clara as well, I think, because at the time we didn't have a proper Clara, and we haven't for years. So I took it upon myself, and I've made a couple of Claras, including a Day of the Doctor version since. And Captain Jimmy Pie was also quite influential as well.
That's really cool. And you know what? Vote Saxon 07. Even though I never did customs, it was always fun to see him make his own customs. I can definitely see how it was such a great influence on you guys. So, you guys have obviously been doing this for a number of years, and who knows how many years that is in total experience combined between the three of you guys. But which custom was the most challenging to create and why? We'll go back to you, Scott.
Without a doubt, it's my Nightmare in Silver Cyberman, which took over a month to create from start to finish. There was so much sculpting involved. It started off with just an Axon body, so it was very plain and simple. And I really took all that time to individually sculpt each part and build up the layers until it got there to the full design. And to this day, it's still one of my proudest achievements customizing wise.
Yeah, I remember you building that one and you sending in the updated photos for it each time. Now, how exactly did you sculpt it?
All with milliput, and it was just in layers. So I would start off with, for example, on the torso, I started off with the kind of ab section of the armor, and I did the first piece, and then I added layers, and then added layers, and just kept going eventually till it built up the entire torso sculpt.
That's amazing. And would you say you have more positive memories associated with this one, or was it so difficult that it's a little more negative? How do you feel about it?
No, it's one I absolutely love doing, and I would do it again and again and again.
That's awesome. Jack, same question for you.
I'd say my most challenging custom figure to date would have been my Foretold from Mummy on the Orient Express. A lot of my customs are made from kit bashing, so having to sculpt a mummy from scratch, was going to be pretty hard. And I would say the most challenging part was getting a sort of a seamless look to the wrappings of the bandages. So, and also because there was no figure skinny enough and in the same scale as the Doctor Who figure range, I had to go a scale up to Marvel Legends and use a Guardians of the Galaxy Gamora figure. So then I dremeled her, down to her bare bones, basically, sculpted some of the more like rotten flesh, and then rolled, don't even know how big the sheet of green stuff was, but rolled that out with like a rolling pin and then cut strips of green stuff off and slowly wrapped the figure up like you would with a real mummy. So that would be my most challenging custom to date.
That's incredible. And how long did it take you to make that figure?
Probably 3 or 4 days.
That's not too bad then. And then how did you do the paint apps and weathering for it?
Oh, it was about like 4 different coats. So I did a very dark brown base coat, then did a sort of browny reddy wash to get into all of the sort of details. Then I did a dark brown wash base coat on the bandages, and then a dry brushed the whole figure with like a creamy white color.
That's amazing. And that is a fabulous paint job for it as well. Looks like it just came out of the episode.
Thank you.
Alex, what about you?
With me, I don't really have much of a definitive answer for this because I've got to say, actually, on the whole, because I've not done as many customs compared to like Jack and Scott, but I've done my fair share of them. But they mostly go quite smooth sailing, at least in terms of. I mean, obviously, I do have my challenges, but not too often. I'd say my most challenging one was actually the 12th Doctor from Twice Upon a Time. Not necessarily because of the sculpting or paint work that was involved, but mostly just how many things went wrong with it. Basically, I was just using a very bad brand of paint at the time, which I'm sure we'll get onto later. And I basically just kept on trying with this old like paint that I had, and it just didn't dry properly, and it was just an absolute mess. So I learned a lot of things with that custom because I basically had to I was painting the coat and it just was horrible. So I had to literally remove all the paint and start again once I found a new brand of paint to use. And also I spent a long time actually with the reference pictures for that particular coat as well because I wanted to get all the like damage on the coat correct and paint everything in the right place and cut the bits at the bottom in the right places. So used a lot of cosplay guides for that sort of thing, actually. So I think it was also the first time I really deeply looked at reference material, like on a level I just hadn't before.
That's really cool. And for that particular figure as well, would you say the do you have a positive memory looking back, or was it more negative with all the trouble and experiences you had to go through with that particular one?
It's very negative. Like, it was honestly horrible. But luckily, it turned out okay in the end. But although I think I'm probably gonna upgrade it a little bit in the future because there's some things I'm still not quite happy with it.
Well, you know what? Your hard work shows in that one. It came out great.
Thank you.
Now, you guys have made plenty of figure customs. I'd venture to say probably hundreds between the three of you guys. But if each of you had to pick one custom figure that you made to represent your entire collection, which would you choose and why? We'll go back to you, Scott.
Mine would be my Time Lord Romana because that's the one I'm the most proud of, and I think that visually represents kind of like that's very detailed, that figure in particular, and kind of that's what I aim for with all of my customs. But that one in particular is just a favorite and a standout, I think, in my collection.
That one is absolutely gorgeous. And how exactly did you do the paint details for the dress?
I think it was just dry brushing really, and just with a very thin brush, just doing all the little designs. I didn't put much thought into it, but the result still came out really well.
And was this one of the first figures that you used 3D printed parts for?
Yes, I think it actually is the first I used. I the actual collar is designed by a guy on Facebook called James Lee, who's absolutely incredible. And the actual robe is designed myself and printed. So I'm very proud of that one.
That's incredible. That figure is probably one of my favorites from your collection. Jack, what about you?
I think I'm gonna cheat here and choose my 12th Doctor's console room because even if it's not finished yet, but it's about 70% of the way through, and it's not 100% accurate, but it's close enough to the official thing for me to be happy with it. And I think it's definitely the one thing in my collection that I've taken the most time to build, and make sure everything goes to plan. So I think I would choose my 12th Doctor's console room.
That one, even though it's unfinished, it's looking spectacular so far. What would you say has been the hardest thing to build for it?
Definitely the sort of lower hexagonal walls because I have to cut each one out by hand, and a few of them tore, so I had to do them. And I think I counted all in all there might be over 100 hexagons I had to cut out. So definitely the walls. Plus Scott actually helped me a lot with that console room. He 3D printed me the sort of upper time rings or whatever they're called that spin at the top of his console. He's printed me the console and he's doing me the upper level roundels. So big shout out to Scott.
That's awesome. And what are the materials that you use to make your console room?
Most of it's made out of foam board. There's card, there's plastic, obviously, with the printed stuff. And yeah, there's not a single, piece of wood, metal, there's nothing of that in there. It's just all foam and card.
That's really cool. See, it goes to show you can use anything to make these customs. Okay, now on to you, Alex. If you had to pick one custom figure to represent your entire collection, which would you choose and why?
Well, I always alternate between two of my custom figures that are my sort of ones that I go to. My Nardole figure and my monk figure. Today, just because I feel like it, I'm going to say the monk figure because I'm not one who usually does monster figures, especially ones that haven't been made by character before. So it was quite a unique task for me, especially with all the sculpting work involved with that figure. And I'm really happy with the actual sculpting that I did, and as well as the paint apps as well. It came out way better than I even thought it could. And I'll briefly mention my Nardole figure as well because it is my second favorite and sometimes is my favorite depending on what day of the week it is, because I think I've just got the costume accuracy really good with that one. Yeah, again, I think the color of the coat really does it for me. Like I didn't think I'd get it as right as I did. Sometimes I look at the head sculpt and don't think it's that great, but to be honest, that doesn't bother me. The glasses are actually from a Winston Churchill figure from the Victory of the Daleks set, because that set actually had a spare pair. And I tried to use the Hawthorne glasses, but they're a little bit too thick and the shape wasn't quite right, and they didn't sit on the ears very well. But the actual Churchill ones have the little, actual proper things that go with the ears. And so yeah, I used those and just tweaked them, changed the shape a little bit, cut like sort of the rounded bits off and painted the brown section's copper just to get that look of Nardole's glasses. And I think that's what really makes the head sculpt work. Without the glasses, he does look a little bit unusual. And for me, and what really makes that figure really stand out is the fact that Matt Lucas retweeted my Twitter post of that figure, and he said wow about it. So, clearly, if the man himself likes it, I've clearly done a very good job with it. So that
Yeah.
really made my day, and for that reason, it really holds a special place in my heart.
Yours is so good. It inspired mine. It really did.
Thank you.
I looked at yours for reference pictures for my one.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, Alex, is what figure did you use the Pyrovile Priestess as the base figure for the monk?
Yes, I did. But obviously, the Paravel Priestess is like really short. Like she's really short, like kind of crazy. So for it, I had to basically cut the figure in half at the waist section and basically milliput sculpt a load of robes in the middle of it, so it just like was a lot taller. So it's still not quite as tall as it should be, but it's I didn't want it to be too disproportionate. It's sort of a little bit shorter than the 12th Doctor, which, given how much of a giant the 12th Doctor is anyway, I don't think that's too big of a deal.
Now, this next question, who or what originally inspired you to create custom figures? And what is your motive nowadays to keep making customs? And Scott, you touched on this briefly, so we'll go back to you.
Yeah, so on YouTube it was Torchwood95, and then on I think it's called Doctor Who TV, or no, Doctor Who Online. It was Baby Jelly is another one, and then I don't know if any of you remember this, but the Doctor Who Toys Net forum,
Yeah.
on the main page, there's like a customizing section where they used to let people send in their customs, and they'd post them all on this page.
I remember that.
And I used to sit there. Yeah, I used to sit there and spend hours going through and looking at everybody's customs on there, and just taking inspiration and this, seeing their ideas and then using that in my own customs. So they're really what got it started. And then as for what's motivating me nowadays, I am really enjoying trying to fill gaps in my collection, because I don't know if any of you seen on my page, I've got everything in story order and doctor order from 1 to 13, and I'm enjoying filling those little gaps where there's parts where the line is slightly more emptier for certain eras. And then the other big thing that keeps me going is everybody's reactions to my customs, and seeing people kind of boosting me up and telling me what they think. And then more of a personal one, my partner, Tom, he does fashion, and seeing him being creative in his outlet for it kind of keeps me going with mine as well. So yeah, I'm never going to stop, basically.
That's awesome. And we hope you never stop making customs, because when I say you're one of the best, you are one of the best out there. Now, Jack, who's your original inspiration and what's your motive nowadays for making customs?
Like I said at the beginning of the show, I'd say the guy who originally inspired me was Vote Saxon 07, because his attitude towards the customs was brilliant and still is brilliant. He was always like, as long as you're happy with your result at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And I think that's a really, really good attitude to have, because I think there's certain people in the community that sort of try, the only reason they do it is to outdo others, which I think is a really bad attitude to have toward, your hobby in general. I'd say what keeps me going today is probably the community. I've been really lucky to have found a great group of, like-minded people such as yourselves. Scott's done a lot of work personally to bring the community together. So I would say, the community keeps me going nowadays. And I think what else is also really nice is seeing, like Alex said earlier, cast members from the show interacting with the fans. I think that's like it gives you a lot of like encouragement. Like, not I hate saying it like stuff like this. Joe Martin, who played the Roof Doctor or the Fugitive Doctor, complimented my custom of her character from the show, and that gave me such like excitement and sort of like reinvigorated me. My love for the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at your Joe Martin figure right now, and I'd venture to say you were probably one of the first to make her as a custom figure, right?
I think so. I think Scott beat me to it by a few days.
I rushed mine like the minute she appeared. I started, and actually, funnily enough, I was going to say that Joe Martin did exactly the same for mine, and it's probably the highlight of me customizing is Joe Martin DMing me about my custom.
That's honestly really cool.
Didn't Sasha Dewan also see your custom of his master, Scott?
No, that was me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, was it Sasha Dewan?
And me as well.
Did he reply?
Yeah, Sasha Dewan's. He posted mine on his story.
What? He saw mine. He left me on red.
He's posted mine on my story, and then the other one is Pearl Mackie.
Oh, she's so lovely.
She posted my very first Bill figure before they did the official one. I think I used a River song for it. She posted that on her Instagram. It's still on there now. If you go on her Instagram and scroll really far down to when she was in the show, she posted it, and I showed it to her at Comic-Con as well, and she like hugged me and thought it was really cool.
She's so nice. Meanwhile, I get left on red by the master.
She's still not seen my Bill custom, but I'm not going to complain.
You've got the highest honor of all, Doctor Who fans. Nardole retweeted your custom.
Yeah, 100%. I haven't had that.
Exactly. That is the ultimate highlight. I practically don't have to ask for anything else.
It almost seemed like you and Scott had a friendly competition going on between making the first Series 11 or Series 12 customs. Now, if you had to compare with each other, who has more customs than the other for Series 12?
Oh, I don't know.
Season 12, I don't know if, well, the one thing I will say is that 100% your Peter Capaldi era collection, no comparison at all. Yours is like amazing. Yours is what I inspire to have.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jack, I think you do have the biggest Capaldi collection.
It's because I'm just a little nerd for Capaldi.
So am I. Like, I've just got so many Capaldi customs.
Alex is doing. I'm allowed to say that you're doing every
Yeah,
single costume
you can-
variant.
Well, one day I'm going to get every single costume variant done, but that's a long way away. But we'll get there
Your
eventually.
Girl Who Died custom though is insane.
Thanks. Yeah, I just finished that today.
Much like Scott's TLV collection is also, just out of the world.
I think my favorite one out of those is the Katura
Yeah,
He came out amazing.
and the 10th.
I would say I'm looking at my series, my 13th Doctor era stuff now. I would say probably the only one that I'm truly, truly happy with is the Lone Cyberman and the Cyber Warriors.
I love your Lone Cyberman. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I've only done one Series 12 figure, and that's the 13th Doctor in Tuxedo.
Yeah, but you've sold quite a few as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I made like 5 of them, and yeah, like I've sold 3 of the 4 that I've planned to sell, so that's all pretty good.
I'm very, very excited for Nathan Ward to start doing his Lone Cyberman head, because I'm quite pleased with my Lone Cyberman that I did, but I feel like his Lone Cyberman head is just gonna save it completely and just make it one of my favorite customs.
It looks phenomenal. It's like an official sculpt. It looks that good.
Yeah, the stuff NDW creates and the attention to detail, and especially the sculpts themselves, rival character options. It's amazing what fans can do. Alex, what about you? Who or what originally inspired you to create customs, and what's your motivation nowadays?
Well, on YouTube, it was mostly Vote Saxon 07 with his modification madness. That was quite cool because it was really the first time I really got the idea of actually doing customs. It was never something I really thought about before, but because he took you through how he made his figures, that was sort of the main thing. Because when you sort of see other customs, you sort of don't know how people did it, if that makes sense. So it sort of made it feel a little bit easier to do when he sort of showed you it step by step how to make them, even if his customs aren't like the peak sort of level. But that's not really why he was doing it, which I think was very inspirational in its own right. But then there was Captain Jimmy Pie. He was obviously sort of the big customizer on YouTube at the time and still is. And another one is Seventh Who Vlogs, who currently goes as Mono Supreme on YouTube now. He does some pretty cool customs and kind of inspired me as well. And as Scott said as well, the Doctor2Toys.net customs page, I remember looking through that quite a few times and just going, that's a cool idea and that sort of thing. And also just Google images in general, you just sort of find other people's work, and that sort of was rather interesting to me. And in terms of what keeps me going now, mostly just wanting certain characters that I know the character aren't going to make is kind of what keeps me going, or making something just slightly different to what character has done. Like today, obviously, I've done my Girl Who Died 12th Doctor, which character I've made an official version of, but I just want mine to look different and more screen accurate and things like that. And the community as well, of course, there's lots of people who really love what I do, and I think that's definitely what keeps you going. And obviously, as we've said, actors' responses, like with Matt Lucas for me, and I also showed Alex Kingston my River Song customs at Wales Comic Con last year. She loved them. So yeah, it's all that sort of thing really that really keeps you going with this sort of thing.
That's really cool. Now, this is a general question for you guys as well. Do you have a particular era of the show that you make the most customs of? And I'm pretty sure we know the answer for Jack.
Definitely for me, it would be the Capaldi era of the show. I think his era has been severely mistreated and underrepresented in basically all of the merchandise for his era, but especially his character options figure line, being that we only got, I think, 3 or 4 different coloured shirt variants and a Clara figure and 2 Missies or 3 Missies, which I think, for his era had some of the coolest monster designs. So to not have them in figure form seems sort of a shame to me. So I've made it my personal goal to have at least one monster from every episode of his on-screen appearance.
I'm very similar to you, Jack. I've definitely got to say that I've probably made the most customs in the Peter Capaldi era, and it's because he's my favorite Doctor. And as you said, the merchandise for his era is just not great. It just, for some reason, character options didn't make many figures from his era. It's really unfortunate, really. And I just sort of want to have my favorite era of the show represented a lot better in figure
Yeah,
form. And in my sort of earlier days of doing customs, I did a lot of Eighth Doctor Big Finish customs because I felt like the Eighth Doctor's era was very underrepresented because, well, for obvious reasons. So I did figures like the 11, Dark Eyes Master, and Lucy Miller, and ones like that. So yeah, those sort of the 2 eras that I think is the ones I sort of draw to. But mostly just anywhere where there's gaps, really, I sort of go.
I was going to say with the Big Finish, that's particularly an era that I've started gravitating to more recently with the War Doctor, the Eighth Doctor, and just filling that void of the Time War because I don't know, it just really interests me. That time that wasn't obviously on screen, so that's what I'm gravitating to more at the moment. But it does change, and I like to just fill gaps where there's bits that are missing. Like particularly, there's not very much done for the first and second Doctor, and the sixth Doctor as well.
Yeah, and if I ever get into customs or anything like that, for me personally, I would have to say I would fill in as many holes for the 80s era of Doctor Who for the 5th Doctor, the 6th Doctor, and the 7th Doctor, just because we had some amazing costumes and creatures and characters, and it's a shame that we never got figures of them. Like, how cool would a 5.5-inch Tetrap be?
yeah,
Awesome. But yeah, much like you guys as well, I would love to fill in some holes in my collection. Just immediately offhand, a Teller figure would be cool. And then, of course, some of the prototypes that were never released, like the Minotaur from season 6 or even the Fisher King.
Fisher King.
Yes, the Fisher King.
It's a shame we never got him.
We have to have that one day.
Please, Aljuar, if you're listening, please give us the Fisher King. We beg you.
That one would be one of the most ultimate figures, hands down, ever.
Hashtag release the king.
Get that trending, guys. Seriously though, like honestly, the Fisher King is a fantastic figure design. Like, he'd make such a great figure. It's criminal that we don't have him.
Even as a prop, he looked like one of the scariest aliens the show has ever had. He is just bone-chillingly scary. It's amazing. Now, for you guys, we'll go back to you, Scott. What is your best piece of advice to anyone who wants to become a figure customizer?
I think my advice would be to take your time. I think that's the most important thing because even when I first started, I'd rush because I'd want to get something done as soon as possible. And then I'd realise that the paint is smudged, there's fingerprint marks in my sculpting. And yeah, it's just so important to take your time. And also, the right paint and the right brushes, I think, is a huge impact. A lot of the model paints are the best ones to use. And for small details, obviously, the smallest brushes you can get.
And what brand of paint do you use, Scott, if you don't mind me asking?
I use quite a big mixture, to be fair. I use Revel, I use Tamiya, and I use Humbrol, I think that's the one. And I've also started using spray paints recently because for some figures it's just easier, particularly Daleks and figures that just need one overall base color and then lots of little details in color.
Since you mentioned spray paints, that's actually something I probably do more of. That's how I painted my 3D printed Quark. That's how I'm currently going to paint my Zarbi and then also my Remembrance of the Daleks Supreme Dalek. I'm going to have that spray painted relatively soon when I'm finished printing all the parts for him. And then Jack, same question for you.
Pretty much all of the paint Scott just said I use. I can confirm that Revel is my brand of choice. They're the ones I would go with, more often. But I don't know, for my advice, I would probably keep it, short and sweet and say my number one piece of advice is to have fun. There's no point in doing this if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So always try and enjoy yourself.
That's a very good piece of advice. And Alex, you too.
I'd say don't make the mistake I made and don't use enamel paints. Please, just don't. Because I mean, I used enamels on like Revel and Humbrol enamels for a couple of years, but I don't know what they did. They for some reason like changed the formula or the mix or whatever, so that if your plastic is not literally rock hard solid, it will not dry. So it really messed me up with my customers for quite a while. Because as I say, with the Twice Upon a Time 12th Doctor, that's when it was like that was the straw that broke the camel's back with that one. And I was like, these paints are not good enough anymore. So my brand of choice, just like Jack and Scott, is the Revel Aquacolor paints. I think they are just brilliant. I only just got a few of those recently, and they honestly they preserve the detail on the sculpts of the figures just brilliantly. Also, Humbrol acrylic paints, they're also pretty good. Although I'd recommend probably avoiding some of the darker colors because they can be a little bit glossy on softer plastic. And to me is all right, but I find it a little bit too liquidy for my taste. It kind of gets a bit messy. And Citadel paints are also pretty good if you want like really specific colors because they have quite a large variety compared to a lot of other brands. Also, as they both said, you gotta take your time with doing customs because I don't produce many each year really compared to what a lot of other people do. But at least I know I'm happy with the quality of them, and I think that's something to make sure you keep your quality good because you don't want to sort of rush it and it then actually look mediocre or not particularly very good. And as Jack said as well, just have fun with it, and also don't be too much of a perfectionist at first. Like if you don't get things quite right, then it's not a huge deal, and people aren't going to be mad at you or something. Don't fall into any kind of pressure from other people. Just do your own thing and have fun.
That's some very good words of advice as well. And between all three of you guys are some of the best customizers out there. And it is really awesome to have you guys in this episode. That will end our customizer Q&A, and I think that'll also bring this episode to a close. This is our first discussion of hopefully many. We plan on making more episodes that focus specifically on custom figures, and we also plan on featuring both new and expert customizers in the future. I would like to thank my awesome friend Jack for joining us in this discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'd also like to thank my friend Alex for joining us in this discussion as well.
It's been a pleasure.
And it's been a pleasure on our end too. And finally, I'd like to thank Scott for joining us tonight as our first guest on our podcast.
Thank you, everyone. As I said earlier, my Instagram is Gallifrey_customs. So please check that out, see my customs and the 3D printed heads I'll be selling soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are going to be a real treat indeed.
I'm at Sci Figure Photography on Instagram.
I am at Doctor Who Figure Photos on Instagram. And if you don't have Instagram, you can follow me at DW Figure Photos on Twitter.
And then last but not least, I'd like to thank you, the audience members, for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed it, be sure to share it with your friends. And also be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We have big things planned, so be sure to stay tuned for more. I'm your host, Wade, and this is the Parliament of the Daleks. If you want, you can talk about both of them, because you can even mention how Matt Lucas even shared a photo of your Nardole.
Yeah, I could.
That sounds wrong.
There's your blooper.
Yeah.
Yeah, we forgot to warn you, Scott. We're not professionals.
Oh, that's right.